Hello, my name is Solazar, and on behalf of our District Director, Shamala Sista, our Program Quality Director, Kalpana Aroda, and our TLI Chair, Jackie Law, I want to welcome you to our summer TLI sessions. Now, the online TLIs are intended to provide information that helps bring your leadership and communication skills to the next level. But before I get into introducing tonight's presenter, I want to speak a little bit about the next level. How many of you have heard of the District 101 program, the 101% Toastmaster? Have you ever wondered what would happen if you combined 2 or more of your favorite brain foods in one easy location or in 1 hour? You could wind up with a specialty club in District 101 and you would be recognized as a 101% Toastmaster. You could add a club in your company or community or career specialty, maybe even an advanced club. That's what we're doing right now in our district. Some of the clubs we're working on right now include a sales and marketing Toastmaster group, a wellness Toastmasters, there are performing arts Toastmasters, and many, many more. Now, those who work on the planning and launching of these clubs will be recognized as 101% Toastmasters. You'll receive a $100 gift certificate, a special limited edition pin, a district director recommendation on your LinkedIn page, and much, much more, all for sharing your interest with others in Toastmasters. So if you're interested in knowing more, maybe joining a team already in progress, go ahead and email Rita Barber, whose link I just put into the chat. And that takes us away from the promo for tonight and gets us to the meat of the event. Now, tonight's presenter will share with us storytelling for leaders. Now, anyone can stand in front of an audience and say words while showing slides. The true question is, did the perspective of the audience change? It doesn't matter what you say, it only matters what they hear. Great stories drive change. So we'll walk away from tonight's presentation with specific strategies that Darren's coaches gave him on how to deliver messages of change so people can listen and agree. We ask everyone to stay muted. If you have a question, please enter your question in the chat, and our TLI chair, Jackie Law, and I will monitor questions and provide them to Darren during the Q&A portion of the presentation. Now, Darren has to leave at 7 p.m. tonight, so let's make sure if we have a question that they're pertinent and important, but we want to give him all the time necessary to get the best information to share with us. You know, it was only in 1992 that Darren first bombed at a comedy store in Massachusetts, and 9 years later, he outspoke 25,000 contestants from over 14 countries to become the world champion of public speaking with a funny speech. Not only that, but people are still talking about that speech over a decade later. So with his presentation, Storytelling for Leaders, help me welcome world champion, accredited speaker, distinguished Toastmaster, Darren LaCroix.
Thank you, Salazar. You have an awesome responsibility. As a leader, people look to you. People need your inspiration. They need your knowledge. They need you to be that amazing leader that you're becoming. We're never done. But every time you're in front of an audience, whether it's 4 people on Zoom at a Toastmaster club or 1,000 people at the Toastmasters convention or in your hometown, you have a responsibility. Don't ever take that lightly. Please, it's critical. So I am going to show you a video now, and I would love you to type in the chat, and Salazar or whoever else is monitoring the chat, I'd love to hear the comments that come in when the video is over. But tell me, type in as you're feeling it, what feelings bubble up for you. This is important for you as a leader and your stories. Check this out. Is it muted?
Yeah, we're not getting the sound.
All right. I don't know why that is happening. All right.
When you did share screen, did you click for the
Let me,
sound?
let me try that again. And for everyone, I am fully aware, and I am a virtual presenter, but man, I'm on the road, which is why my studio is not my studio. So let me, things change. My bad. My responsibility. My responsibility. If you're a leader, it's your responsibility. So let me try this one more time. And Salazar, please let me know. And if it's not coming through, we move on. Share sound. They keep changing the Zoom rules. All right, try this again. You have an awesome responsibility. And there's no sound right at the beginning.
And the 2001 World Champion of Public Speaking, Darren LaCroix. King Darren, your subjects would like to hear a few words from you.
Man, that's cool. My first prayers, I asked God if the other 8 contestants could just go over time. That's all I wanted. Again, thank you to my district, Dave McElhaney, Carmen, of course, the great, the one and only, the genius of speaking, Mark Brown, David Brooks, Ed Tate. The champions are so gracious, giving me wisdom and advice, and I knew I would work hard, but they helped keep me on the right track. Just one more little thing. Did anyone else ever cry during this thing? Am I the first one? Does that count as a gesture? I'll never forget. My dad probably doesn't even remember. He said, I don't care what you want to do. Just be the best. And I am, Dad.
Because that caring and wanting to help people comes through in everything he does.
Darren cares about you. He's a mentor.
And how to deliver a speech, how to write a speech. So it's just, I think you get the full package with Darren.
Darren, as I said earlier, challenges you, and he wants me to get better. He wants me to grow.
Someone just said, you're the world champion. What are you gonna do now? I'm going to Disneyland.
Thank you. So, type in what emotions came up for you as you watched that video. So what do we have?
Excitement and joy came up from Sarah. She said she felt
Hi,
excitement
Sarah.
and joy.
Cool.
Helen Josephine responded to the way you acknowledged everyone. Amit said enjoy, happy. Henry, what are you saying, Henry? I want to win that shield from, oh, that's somebody else. Henry said gratitude. Curdy said, I want to win that shield for myself one day. Daniel said joy. Monique said joy. Daniel said deserve. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you. This is critical for you and your storytelling. So let me know if the gray box is gone too. I think I fixed that challenge. But this is critical. What's that? What's that?
It is gone.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. So picture this. You are walking through Taiwan train terminal. You're in Taipei. You're walking through the train terminal, and I want to know what would go through your mind if you experienced this. All right. So right now, here's my question. In this moment, would you remember this moment? Would it be unforgettable? So here's what I'd love you to do. Please type in the chat. By the way, this is a group of Toastmaster leaders in Taipei. They actually created this moment and they filmed it from many different camera angles for promotion of Toastmasters. You just watched an advertisement. But if you were there, it would be, chances are, unforgettable. But here's my question. Please type it in the chat, and Salazar, help me out on what comes in. How long in advance do you think they prepared? How far in advance do you think they prepared? Please type it in the chat.
We received a 6 months from Daniel, 1 month from Amit, 6 months from Monique, 1 week from Sarah, 2 weeks from Helen, a month from Deanne, 2 months from Carol. Curdy said 6 months, 3 to 6 said Jackie.
Perfect. Here's the point. They planned it. It was an unforgettable moment, but they planned it. They didn't think of this the night before and said, hey, let's put on a show. No, it required planning. The same thing for you and your stories. Anyone can tell a story, but are your stories unforgettable? Do the people who hear your stories, are they able to retell it to other people? See, if you want to be a great leader, you got to be a great storyteller. So this is Howard. He was the lead singer, and he also is a Toastmaster. And these are the leaders from Taiwan, and they're the ones who put this together. Look, do you want to tell create a good story, a great story, or an unforgettable story? There's a different process for each. So again, they could have thrown this together 2 days before. It would not have been well executed, but they could have done it. So for you and your stories, are you working on them? Are you constantly trying to make them better? Or are you just thinking that's good enough? Whenever we have the that's good enough attitude, we're not a great leader. We've got to be that sponge. The process is different for each one. Do you tell unforgettable stories or are they perishable? Ugh, gross. I came home from a trip and a single guy, live alone, didn't have any, didn't put the fruit away. I came back and my first reaction was, ugh. My second reaction was, ooh. I felt something. Let me take a picture. This could be a story. This could be a story. I'm going to change the way you look at stories from now on. So how do you find stories without having to climb Mount Everest? Everyone would love that great Mount Everest story, but the problem with that is it's not as relatable. So your story's memorable or again, unforgettable. Are they perishable? They forget them soon and quickly. Better stories will give you confidence when you walk on stage. Better stories will have you knowing when you walk off stage that you left your message on the hearts and the minds of the audience. You know it. It takes work and it takes effort. And I was a Toastmaster for 7 years trying to figure it out, not really knowing exactly what I was doing. So if you're here, I'm sure this is not your first program on storytelling. I get it, but it's not your fault. If you're not telling unforgettable stories, it's not your fault. There's so much bad information out there, and there's so many bad people giving well-meaning feedback, but really isn't unforgettable. So if you've been concerned and frustrated and not quite sure how to deliver powerful, unforgettable stories, I'm here to tell you you can do this. I was a Toastmaster in 4 clubs for 7 years before I learned some of what you're going to learn tonight, what I learned from my coach. So I'm here to help 2 kinds of presenters and leaders. 1, those who want to find their path to deliver $10,000 stories. And 2, those are looking for the crucial missing links. They already have some skills. They got some skills and some confidence, but maybe it's like that Swiss cheese where you have that little empty spot. You don't know quite where it is. That is my goal. Goal number 2 is to show you how insights from world-class coaches can help you tell unforgettable stories. I didn't have a coach until 2001. I got feedback from my club, but I never had that world-class coach until 2001. So who is my coach? If you don't know Mark Brown, he's the 1995 world champion of public speaking. This is his house, his humble house in Jamaica that he grew up in. He played football. He calls it football. We call it soccer in the United States. And he was on the student council as well. Here's the crazy part. His high school friends told him, Mark can always be seen in the center of a crowd relating one of his experience to listeners. Okay, Mark was a natural born teacher. It was in his blood. It was literally his parents and grandparents were teachers. It was part of who he was. And Mark came to the United States when he was 18 years old with $40 in his pocket and a couple of suitcases. And he went on, he started working for a company called Reader's Digest, and he was a computer programmer. He was a techie. And they had a Toastmasters club at Reader's Digest, and Mark found himself in the club and then found himself in the contest. And in 1994, he actually, his first run, he went all the way to the World Championship finalists. But he did not place. Mark did not place. And this man, David Brooks, the 1990 world champion, walked into his life and said, Mark, here's my card. I see some talent in you. I would love to help you and mentor you if you're interested. Well, David went home, Mark went home the next day, put his bags down in New York where he lived, and immediately picked up the phone and called David Brooks. And he said, David, do you remember me? He said, Mark, I met you yesterday. Of course I remember you. And this started a relationship. A natural born teacher still needed that mentor. And they worked on it for a year. Lo and behold, he found out the next year after he won the world championship that David had offered to help all 8 finalists. Mark Brown was the only one who said yes. Would you say yes if you had the opportunity to work with a world-class coach? Would you say yes? So Mark became the world champion. And this, imagine how I felt. I was the quiet, shy kid. I was the opposite of Mark. I was not a natural born teacher. I was the quiet one who never spoke up. But these were my 2 coaches. I had 2 coaches, David McElhaney on the right and Mark Brown on the left. Here's a bit of wisdom that I got from David McElhaney, my first coach. He had only been to the semifinals himself, but he was a great coach. After I won the semifinals, he walked me over to Mark Brown and introduced me. And he said something brilliant. Catch this. He said, Darren, I can't take you where I have not been. I can't take you where I have not been. That's brilliant. I didn't understand it, the depth of the wisdom at the time, but later on I come to realize, how can you learn to be a great leader from someone who's not a great leader? How can you learn to be a great speaker from someone who's not a great speaker? Who are your mentors? And ask yourself, are they at a level, whether it's leadership or presenting, a place where you want to go, to be? So you may know some of my story. I was the quiet, shy kid. This is me, number 21 on the sidelines. And here's the key, another lesson. Get this. It applies to you and you as a leader and you as a storyteller. I wanted to be in the game. Everybody wants to be a great leader. They want it. I wanted to be in the game, but I was always the guy on the sidelines. I didn't get in the game unless we were way ahead or way behind, unless I couldn't affect the outcome of the game. Think about that. I wanted to be in the game. Everybody wants to be a great leader. They want to be a great speaker. But here's what I learned later on. I wasn't doing what it took to be in the game. My habits did not take me to that place to be in the game. Are you doing what it takes? You can say you want to be a great leader all you want, but are you truly a sponge? Are you truly asking for help? Are you truly asking for feedback from the people that you're leading? Truthful feedback. Are you truly open to it? Finally, my senior year, I said enough is enough. And I was the first person to practice, the last one to leave. I worked harder than anybody else. And by the third game of the season, I finally earned a starting position. I started running 4 miles a day. I started lifting weights. Eventually, people who are the leaders, who make those decisions, they will notice you when you work harder than everyone else. It's easy to stand out with the right amount of effort. I wanted to do it, but I wasn't doing what was necessary. Are you? You may have heard in my championship speech, which it's on YouTube, by the way, if you haven't seen it. This is my opening day of my Subway sandwich shop. After 4 years of business school, I was so excited. I was ready to go for that American dream. I bought the Subway. I invested in it, and I thought for sure I was going to own a whole bunch of Subway shops. I was going to be a multimillionaire. I was so excited. This is the first day. Yes, this is it. I'm arrived. I'm on my way. Well, if you know the rest of the story, about a year and a half later, I had to sell the business at a loss. So I felt like that kid on the sidelines. I wasn't doing what it took to make it successful. I just felt entitled. That was my problem back then. I invested $60,000 into a success system, and then I thought I knew better than the success system. Look, Toastmasters has pathways. Toastmasters has programs. Follow it, but follow it better than anyone else. Work it harder than anyone else. I'm not special. I'm just a guy who used the tool of Toastmasters better than most. In 1992, after my devastation, I tried stand-up.
Does anyone here live in New England? Yeah. I figured I had to get somebody to say it. Did anybody ever notice that every other small town in New England takes one little small historical fact and makes it the greatest event in the world? Sorry for my voice, like fluctuating a little bit. But a lot of towns are like this. I was doing some research, like places like Lexington, you know, the first Revolutionary skirmish happened there. What was his name? I can't even think of his name. Obviously, he was real famous. Eli Whitney was in Westboro, you know, born in Westboro. I was doing some research, and I discovered that the first dentist to use ether actually happened in Charlton, Massachusetts. And an interesting thing about this was he actually experimented himself. You know, nobody else had done this before. And he started with animals, and then he used his own dog.
All right, if you were there that night, would you have ever walked up to me and said, you know, Darren, if you practice real hard, someday you could do this for a living? No. I watch it now, I think, how did I ever go up a second time? But my real question for you is this. If I can go from that to doing this for a living, what can you do? What can you do? For many years, I listened to well-meaning people who had no experience. I listened to the wrong people. Who are you going to? Fast forward to 2001. That was 1992. Fast forward 9 years to this.
After 4 years of business school, I went out and I went for the American dream. I bought a Subway sandwich shop. Oh yeah. You're all impressed, I can tell. I don't want to brag or anything, but in 6 short months, I took a $60,000 debt, and I doubled that debt. That's right, I turned Subway Sandwich Shop into a nonprofit organization. I financially fell on my face.
I did financially fall on my face. One of the biggest challenges in my life became one of my best stories. And it took my coach, Mark Brown, to point it out to me. When I had brought him the first version of Ouch, my world championship speech, he didn't see that story in there. It wasn't in there. It was in me, but it takes a coach to be able to go inside you and pull out that gold, that real life experience, those stories that you don't want to tell. We think it may make us look bad. In fact, it makes us look really good because we show and we be vulnerable. So we connect with our audience. Great leaders have to connect with their audience. So we have to be vulnerable. And I'm also now the only speaker in the world that's an accredited speaker, a CSP, and a world champion. So how were Mark and I different? We were different because I was the quiet, shy kid. He was the natural born teacher. What's the one thing we were common? We both had coaches. We both had those mentors who would help us. Even though Mark was naturally gifted, he still needed to understand. Remember at the beginning, during the introduction, it was said that, do you want to speak or do you want to be heard? If you want to be heard as a leader, you have to understand world-class techniques. So again, this was a powerful moment. But if I went back just 77 days prior to this, so it was a beautiful moment. Now, I've been speaking since doing stand-up comedy for 9 years, but if we go back just 77 days prior, I drove 2.5 hours to work with my coach, Mark Brown. I was all excited. I brought him the first version of the speech. I didn't want to send it ahead of time because I wanted to see the joy on his face when I showed him how much potential I had. So if you were standing there in the meeting room with Mark and me and Dave, my other coach, you would have seen me beaming from ear to ear. I was so excited. And if you don't know Mark Brown, Mark stands about 6'2". He's a native of Jamaica. He's got this beautiful booming laugh like the guy from the old 7-Up commercial. Ah, ha, ha, ha. That was my coach. As I handed Mark the speech, the greatest speech I thought in the history of Toastmasters, as I handed it to him, I thought it was so good you could hear choirs of angels. La! Mark took the speech. Oh, Darren, we have some work to do. What? I did everything you told me to do. I wrote the greatest speech that I could write from the level I was at. But you see, you don't know what you don't know. If you're not coachable, there is no cure. If you're not open to becoming a great storyteller, to becoming an unforgettable storyteller, if you're not open to that idea, if you're not eager to lean in, no one can help you. If you're not coachable, there is no cure. If you're not coachable, there is no cure. So are you coachable? So let me know in the chat. Put in a yes if you're coachable. Please put in a yes if you're coachable. I need some confirmation. Are you coachable?
You're getting them.
All right. Look, as a leader, we can't just tell people what to do. We've got to get them to commit. Get your people to commit, to raise their hand. That's our job. That's why we need great stories. So if you're trying to tell stories without insights from a world-class coach, look, you can go to classes, you can get feedback from unqualified people. This can be hard and confusing and take a long time. So here are 3 essentials to secrets of storytelling, to great storytelling. By the way, I have a free newsletter called Sponge. I've been coaching people for years all around the world, executives, beginning speakers, highly paid professionals, and I found that they all make the same top 10 mistakes. The same top 10 mistakes. So I took my coaching, I'm going to put it in the chat here. And by the way, I see someone sending me a chat. I'm not going to be reading chat. I'm going to be focused on helping everyone. So I will not see that. I apologize. And as I said, I have to leave right at 7 because I have another Toastmasters group to do right after this. So I'm going from one meeting to another. But if you want the top 10 speaking mistakes, the top 10 virtual mistakes, just click on that. You'll also get my newsletter. If you want to opt off, you're more than welcome to opt off. You're not going to bother me or offend me at all. I love this. And I know those 10 mistakes will help you, especially the virtual ones, the top 10 virtual mistakes. By the way, Mark Brown and I have a podcast. If you'd like to join us every week, Unforgettable Presentations, you can scan that with your phone, or I put that link in the chat as well to get the link directly to the podcast. We interview some of the greatest speakers in the world, and we find out what makes them tick. What's their story? Jia Jiang, he was the keynote speaker at the Toastmasters International Convention last time we met live in 2019. I wanted to hear his story. So, number 1, where do we find stories? Number 2, we're going to second secret, what makes them powerful? And number 3, why feedback is critical to great storytelling, to unforgettable storytelling. All right, secret number 1. You are surrounded by powerful stories. You just need to know where to look. You're surrounded. They're all around you. You just haven't learned to mind your life, your everyday life. As Mark Brown says, your stories don't have to be sensational. They just have to be sincere. So, have you ever had story envy? I know I have, where the presenter up on stage tells this amazing story and we're jealous. We wish that story was our story. Guilty. Would you pay $2,800 for it? I would. If I didn't have to go through the pain, if I didn't have to go through the process, I would absolutely do that all day long. Why? Because it's not story envy. It's story process envy. Story process envy. See, we've got to remember that we need to capture what captures you. If you're taking notes, if you want to take a screenshot, please take screenshots. Just don't share them, please, on social media. If you want to send them to your friends, that's fine, but please don't post them. But capture what captures you. What do I mean? Where do you look? Pull out your cell phone right now. If you're not watching this on your cell phone, pull out your cell phone right now and go to the camera roll. Go to the camera roll. And as I go through this next section, I encourage you to just slide through. You don't have to look at me, just flip through and just see if anything resonates. And I think you're going to realize you have a lot of stories right under your nose. Right under your nose. All right. So this is a woman named Alona. Alona was an event planner that brought Mark Brown and I to the Ukraine to teach the same thing that we're teaching you right here. Alona is awesome, but she didn't speak English. She only spoke broken English. We needed a translator with us. Well, notice where her car is parked. Her car is parked on the sidewalk. And then I started noticing all the cars were parked on sidewalks.
We're driving on the sidewalk. We're on the sidewalk. Yeah! Ukraine! Driving on the sidewalk in the Ukraine. Don't mind me, friends. I'm just giving play-by-play for Darren's video here.
Oh, we're off the sidewalk.
And we're going. Woo! Alona can drive.
So I also noticed something else that was unusual. They were collecting phones. So we're working with some high level executives and they're walking around with a fishbowl collecting phones. I was like, what? In the United States, you would get shot for doing something like that. They literally walked around the room. Notice Mark is presenting and they're walking around the room looking for this. They're collecting cell phones. This blew my mind. So I took a picture. I saw the cars on the sidewalk, so I took a picture. You take pictures naturally. You just don't realize why you're doing it, or there's a story underneath it as well. The one thing that struck Alona about Mark was his laugh. And the night before, we had worked with the executives. We had a public seminar, and I told the Mark Brown story, and I said he's 6'2", he has a heart of gold, he's a native of Jamaica, and he's got this beautiful booming laugh, like the guy from the old 7-Up commercial. Ah, ha, ha, ha. That was my coach. That was Mark. And it struck her. So the next morning when we were setting up, check this out.
What do you mean? Do with you? All right. What do you want to hear? Let's hear your laugh. No, I hear Alona laugh. Let her laugh alone. Let Alona laugh alone. That's great. I love that. That is so awesome. Made my night wonderful. Now you're doing it too now.
All right. If you smiled or laughed, we elicited emotion. We're going to get to that. But you must elicit emotion. You must tell stories. You must use videos that help elicit emotion. That's what makes you unforgettable. That's what helps them remember your message. So when Mark and I were flying back, we went through Germany and we had a layover there. We're in the airport. We're having breakfast at this airport. And Mark was talking about, why did I take all these pictures? What was it? And we started narrowing it down, and his wisdom spilled out. And you probably can't read my handwriting or don't understand it. So here, let me simplify it for you. Mark said, look at your photos, look at your pics, and ask yourself, what amazes you, what amuses you, and what moves you. Write those down. Take a screenshot. What amazes you, what amuses you, and what moves you. Now, for you and I as leaders and presenters, here's the difference. What was the lesson learned? What amazes you, what amuses you, what moves you? What was the lesson learned? That lesson learned is the message of that story. But we need to tell that story in order to deliver that message. It's in there. Mark says your audience wants to hear you, but they really want to know you. And they know you through your stories. That's how we get to know who you are and builds your perspective. So start a story file. If you don't already have one, start a story file. You're going to go into a club or into a place where you're going to find out right away from the leaders of that club that there's a special challenge there. Well, do you have a story that could help them? Start a story file. Every time you get an idea, write it down in your story file. Write it down on a post-it note later and then add it to your story file. Look, if you owned a furniture company, your inventory is furnitures. If you owned a floor company, your inventory is floors. As a leader, as a presenter, your inventory is stories, are stories. So get an app if you'd like. There's a free one that Ed Tate, world champion, uses called Evernote. I just use old school word processing, Word document, but whatever works for you, but start a story file. That's your homework. That's number one, start a story file. You already get stories that you could add in there, but continue to add to it and you will be able to tell better stories faster. And then for our younger viewers, there's an old one called Paper, not as searchable as a Word document or Evernote. But again, this is what I use. I use old school Word document. I'm going to skip through this for time wise. I apologize. Well, I brought it up. Getting corporate presenters to see the power of a story. So I used a story. Chip and Dan Heath, if you haven't ever gotten the book, great book, Made to Stick. They say 63% of listeners remember stories. Only 5% remember the statistics. So if you have an important statistic, give it, but wrap it inside a story so we remember it. Great book, Made to Stick. And you probably heard this before, but 31.25% of presenters make up statistics on the spot. I love this by Ed Tate. He says, our job as presenters is to turn the numbers back into people. Turn the numbers back into people. Think about that. If you give corporate presentations, there's a stats, but it's our job. So what? What does that mean to me sitting here in the audience listening to you? Your personal stories can make professional points. You can have a story in your story file and then let me find the point to that. Or I have a point. Let me find the story. Sometimes it goes both ways. Sometimes I have the story and I'm looking for the point. Sometimes I have a point and I'm looking for the story. But remember, they don't have to be sensational. They only have to be sincere. If we look at recent years in the World Championship, Aaron told a story about a wedding. Ramona about a failed marriage. Press about a flat tire. Mark about watching a Disney movie with his kids. Me about a sub shop and a rocket failure. Okay, these are simple personal stories. They're not sensational. My sub shop failed. People can relate to that. So you have more stories than you think if you know where to look. Start a story file. Continue to add to it every day. You're going to have ideas when you're driving, when you're taking a shower, all day long, when you're talking to friends and family. Add it, add it, add it. If I can get you to do one thing, that's going to catapult you forward. Number 2, there is a time-tested story structure to deliver a memorable message. What? There is a time-tested story structure to deliver a memorable message. Here's a crazy thing. The weirdest feedback I ever got. When I was working on my championship speech, now I had not much history in contests. This was new to me in the Toastmaster format. I was a part-time professional. I still had a day job. I was doing stand-up, but contests were something that was new to me. So I go to this advanced club and I deliver an early version of Ouch. And these 2 ladies who had been around Toastmasters and in contests much longer than me, they walk up to me, they cross their arms and they said, "We didn't feel anything." I was like, it's a speech. What are you talking about? Feel something. And at the moment, I didn't understand what they were saying. What they were saying was critical to you as a great storyteller and a leader. See, we all have different stories, but we all share the same 6 emotions, from David Brooks. David Brooks said, we all have different stories. We all share the same 6 emotions. You know, my Subway shop failed. Well, maybe you don't have a Subway shop failure, but you had an emotion when you had a failure that matched my emotion when I had a failure. See, we connect on the emotions, not on the literal. This is what I mean. Michael Haig has taught me the most since winning the world championship. He said this: the goal of any story is to elicit emotion. The goal of a story is to elicit emotion. That's why at the very beginning I said, you know, when you watch the video, I asked you, what did you feel? Many of you chimed in and talked about the feeling, the emotion that you had. Well, I worked really hard to get that video to work and elicit emotion. Cut it, edit it, tighten it, edit it, tighten it. So for you and your stories, if you're just telling a story to make a point, I'm encouraging you to go deeper. Tell a story that elicits emotion that makes a point. There's a difference. It's deeper. Why? People love stories. They change perspective. We like being entertained. They bring presentations to life. But here's probably one of the most important ones. This is what makes it unforgettable. It reaches the subconscious mind. It reaches the subconscious mind. A story well told. Oh. Have you ever had a child just before bedtime say to you, "Mommy, Daddy, show me a PowerPoint presentation"? No, it's tell me a story. Tell me a story. So we're conditioned from childhood to be able to, and to love that, to love stories. There's these grooves in our brain that a story well told, boom, goes right in one of those grooves and goes to our subconscious mind. So that's where true influence happens. If you really want to influence somebody, you must do it to the subconscious mind. Here's what I mean. The conscious mind is what you know. The subconscious mind is where your habits, you act from your habits. We need to get our story in there, our perspective in there in the subconscious mind, so then we act differently. We're not just aware. We know we need to pause. But once we truly understand it, we pause differently. See, because it's reached our subconscious mind. Here's the challenge. We forget most of what we hear. Some studies have said that we lose 50% of what we hear in a day. Tomorrow, you're going to forget 50%. Next day, you're going to forget another 50%. By Sunday, another 50%. By next week, you'll swear I was not even here. So that's the problem. What's the challenge? The challenge is we need to get it into the subconscious mind. There's 2 ways to do that. 2 strategies for getting it into the subconscious mind. One is repetition, repetition, repetition. But we can't, as the listener, we can't be swayed to think, oh, I've heard that before. Oh, I've heard about storytelling. I know how to do storytelling. A true sponge, someone's truly eager, is going to lean in and want to get more from it. If I could just learn one new tip tonight that would affect my storytelling, tonight would be worth it. But repetition, 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 you finally get it. That's why in a TV commercial, you hear 3 or 4 times the number, the phone number, the website, the URL. That's why we teach people in a 7-minute contest speech, give your foundational phrase 3 or 4 times to make it sticky, to get it into the subconscious mind. When it pops into your subconscious mind, that's an aha. An aha is the letting go of a previous belief. An aha is a letting go of a previous belief. Let that one sink in. That's what we talk about. Perspective has changed. We never go backwards once we understand it at a higher level. The second way is a story well told. Well told story, not just a story. So what is a well told story? Great question. I love this by one of my mentors. His name was Stanley Ralph Ross. He said a story is an appealing protagonist in pursuit of a worthwhile goal against seemingly insurmountable obstacles. An appealing protagonist. We like the hero. We're cheering for the hero. In pursuit of a worthwhile goal. You know this is important to the character. Maybe not to you, but to the character. You can see it's worthwhile. And then there's insurmountable obstacles. There's things in the way. How are they ever going to do that? Perfect. Now you're hooked. That's a well-told story. I got this advice in 1998 from one of my mentors. He said, Darren, stop trying to find that story that will launch your career, and instead take the stories you already have and make them so good someone will pay to hear them. What? Take the stories you already have and make them so good someone will pay to hear them. That was a big perspective shift for me. See, I just thought you find a story, you tell it, maybe you tweak it a little. I didn't realize there was a world-class structure to force me to go deeper, to know what elements I need to make it unforgettable. I didn't listen for 2 years. And in 2001, I entered the speech contest because I finally accepted his advice. I took out from my paid keynote speeches, I took out some of my best stories, and I put it into the contest. I worked on it, with my whole goal, not to win, but to put it back in the keynote, thus raising the value of the keynote. Craig Valentine brilliantly says, if you want to master peace, you have to master the pieces. If you want to master peace, you have to master the pieces. So here I was, one of the stories in my district contest was district level 1 to 4 was about my first time on stage. So here I am a couple years ago in Taiwan. This is Therese. She's a district director. We were on a high-speed train going from one city to another city to give a presentation. She turns to me on the high-speed train and says, Darren, 6 years ago, the last time you were in Taiwan, I was in your audience. I was not even a Toastmaster. I heard you tell that story of your first time on stage and how nervous you were. She did that with her hand. And that's how I tell the story. She said, it inspired me. I joined Toastmasters and I went up the rungs of the ladder and now I'm a district director. What? The story inspired her. It was unforgettable. But I don't take credit that it was me. I just did the work that my mentor told me to do. He said, take the stories you already have and make them so good, you'll get paid for them. What he was also saying is make them so good, they'd be unforgettable. It was unforgettable for Therese. She remembered how I told the story 6 years later. Please take that advice from my mentor. Take the stories you already have and make them so good, someone will pay to hear them. Maybe you're wondering, how do you do that? You find a great coach. I created Stage Time University in order to help people do exactly that. Things that I didn't have access to. You don't have any powerful stories. Well, you actually need our insights from time-tested structure to deliver a memorable message. Earlier, I asked if you had story envy. You actually have story process envy. When you see somebody tell a great story, you're actually seeing an end result of a process of trial and error and change and tweak and coaching and trial and error and change and tweak and coaching. It's the process that most people aren't willing to go through. But if you want to be a great leader, you got to be willing to go through that. This is one of the structures that we teach, Craig Valentine's model. We get the audience curious. We bring them into the story. We introduce the characters. We immediately put the characters into conflict. We give the cure to the character. The character changes. And then we as speakers give that carry out message to our audience. If you're not coachable, there is no cure. That's one of my carry out messages. So the change is critical. If we don't see a change in the character, why are you telling the story? I never knew that before. The carry out message, which makes us different from entertainers. So follow a time-tested story structure that will elicit emotion to deliver your message. Final secret number 3. Qualified feedback is essential to delivering unforgettable stories. Qualified feedback. What do I mean by that? Are you okay with the truth? If you're here and you want to get an unforgettable story, it doesn't look like that. That's not reality. The truth is effort times direction plus correction equals mastery. Effort times direction plus correction equals mastery. This is truly what it looked like. When I was working with Mark, we would try something and test it and tweak it and try it and tweak it. So it's not a direct path. I had to go reconnect with Mark and tell them, here's how I did the story. Here's what people are thinking along the way. So let's get super clear. There's 2 kinds of feedback. Number 1, here's what I thought and felt. Everyone is qualified to tell you that. Number 2, here's how to make it better. Only a qualified coach is qualified to tell you how to make it better. Be careful. Be careful. Be careful. So I'm going to ask you to type into the chat and let me know what comes in. When I did my fall of my championship speech, and we'll wrap this up in 3 minutes and then I'll take questions. When I was working on my championship speech, I would go to practice clubs. So type in number 1 or number 2. So when I did the fall at practice clubs, here's what they told me. And you tell me, put in a number 1 or a number 2. So let me know what comes in. Is this feedback number 1 or number 2? So here's what I heard over and over again. I was uncomfortable. You were down too long. You should get up sooner. I was uncomfortable. You were down too long. You should get up sooner. I was uncomfortable. You were down too long. You should get up sooner. So what's coming in? Number 1 or number 2?
Number 1.
Number 1?
Got it 2. Got it 2. Another 1. Another 1.
Awesome. Thank you, Salazar. So you're partially correct. Here's the truth. You were down too long, thought and felt. I was uncomfortable, thought and felt. You should get up sooner. That's coaching. That's where we have to be careful. All these well-meaning people told me I should get up sooner because they were uncomfortable. When I took that same exact advice to my coach, Mark Brown, and I said, Mark, they're all saying I should get up sooner. Mark said in his wisdom, Darren, our job is not to make the audience comfortable. It's to make them uncomfortable so they will change. Stay down longer. What? Stay down longer. But they're saying, he said, stay down longer. Remember the principle of eliciting emotion. When they're uncomfortable, that's an emotion. And then if you go back and watch my championship speech, you'll see I took that feeling and I actually used it to make a point. So they were all feeling something. So I needed to know that. But then we used it to make a point. Did you feel I stayed down too long? Wow, how did he know what I was thinking? Have you ever stayed down too long? It became one of the most powerful moments of my presentation. Had I listened to well-meaning presenters, it would have lessened my audience impact. If I listened to the wrong people, I needed the thought and felt. Everyone's qualified. Get that, get that, get that. But when you're looking at adjusting your speech, you've got to be careful who you listen to. Well-meaning people who are unqualified. Look, get some direction from world-class coaches. But when you get coaching, when someone works with you and looks at your story and your delivery style, That's when you can dramatically impact your audience. Again, if I listened to well-meaning people and took their advice, it would have lessened it. I wouldn't have had them eliciting emotion. I love this by Ron Lewison. You should ignore 90% of the feedback you receive. The trick is to know the 10% that's gold. The 10% comes from a qualified coach. I love this by Geeta. She said, a coach has the power to unlock what's been inside you that you can't access. That Subway story, that important failure story in my life was not in the version 1. I needed Mark to show that to me. I love this by Charlie Chaplin. He said, all you need for good stories, a park bench, a pretty girl, and a police officer. It's true. A setting, a goal, and an obstacle. An appealing protagonist in pursuit of a worthwhile goal against seemingly insurmountable obstacles. It's the same. So real quick, our 5-story coaching essentials checklist. Number 1, let them picture the setting. Let them picture the setting. Let them see the characters. Mark Brown stands about 6'2". Let them feel the conflict. Let them hear the dialogue. And then let them witness the change. One more time. This is brilliant and took us a decade to figure out. Let them picture the setting. Let them see the characters. Let them feel the conflict. Let them hear the dialogue in conversation, and let them witness the change, that the character's different at the end of the story. The beginning of my story, when I handed it to Mark Brown, I was all excited and full of ego. And at the end, the emotional shift. Look, I've covered a lot of ground, world-class techniques in just 52 minutes. So I hope this has been helpful to you. So if you listen to elicit emotion, you must have a time-tested structure, get qualified feedback, and understand you have stories inside you if you just know how to tap in. Look, if you're interested, I'm going to put a link in the chat. If you'd like to know more about working with me and my coaches, I created this. I'm actually a sponsor for the Toastmasters Convention next week, where good presenters become unforgettable. We teach you, we give you both direction and correction. So I will put that in the chat. You can go to the link after the meeting and check it out and find out more. Salazar?
Darren, thank you so very much. And I think we should all give you an early applause before we give you a final applause. That was phenomenal. And you took us through so much information very, very quickly. The link is now in the chat, by the way, for stage time for those who are looking. Darren, I want to question one thing. Last year, you've touched on this. I believe I could answer it, but I'd like to hear from you. We had 3 different presenters talking about storytelling, and each presenter said something very specific. They all said it. If you hear a good story, make it your own, which I felt you told us is tell our own stories. I think that's 2 different messages.
Never make it your own. Never. Ever. Hey, well, but keep in mind too, like, look, I respect other presenters, but there's a line that's crossed. And I came from the stand-up comedy world where if you did anyone else's material, there's only so many comics in Boston. If you did anyone else's material, the club owner and every other comic would know you were blackballed. Your career was done. You did not get invited back. There's only 4 clubs in Boston. Everybody knows everyone else's material. If you steal a material, and I've seen this in the World Championship, you know, they take a story like the starfish story, which is overused, and then they change some of the elements, but it's the same story. It's like, if you steal, which that's what it is. Look, you can learn from a great story, write down the elements, write it out, and then ask yourself what are they doing? What are they saying? And follow the structure, but do not follow the story. It's not your story. You're going to tell a story better when it came from your heart. Now we've got to figure out how to structure it and how to tell it best. Absolutely. But when you take someone else's story, that's plagiarism. That's illegal. And if you want to be a highly paid speaker, if they want a Tony Robbins story, they're going to hire Tony Robbins. Yeah, maybe his budget, his pay is a lot more than yours. But if they see you out there telling Tony Robbins stories, Why are they gonna hire you? They're not. They're just not. So please, if you learn to steal, you'll get good at stealing. Learn to find your own, and you'll get better faster. Salazar?
One of the things you stressed also during the presentation that I'd like to come back to is that we don't have to have climbed Mount Everest in order to tell our story. For the first place, many people won't be able to relate to it. And secondly, we actually have relatable stories that we should feel proud to share because we're saying, here's the emotion I experienced.
Mm-hmm.
What was the experience like for you? And that seems to be the key of why we share stories. Did I say that correctly?
Yeah, you said that very well. And again, just like I said, Aaron Beverly, his was about a wedding, press, a flat tire, mine, a Subway shop. Mark Brown watching a Disney movie with his kids. None of them are climb Mount Everest stories.
So we don't have other questions in from any of
Can we share our questions?
Hold on, put it in the chat, Arnie. Put it in the chat.
My chat is not, Mr.
So if you've got a question, put it in the chat, please.
My chat is not working, so.
All right, don't give one of your three-part questions, though.
Okay. Okay. Just one question there. There are, Mr. LaCroix, a legend. Yeah, there are stories that are stale, mundane, banal, and boring. How would you make this powerful? How would you give that emotion? Through gestures, through words, or what? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Solarsa.
Thank you, Arnie.
Yeah, Arnie, thank you for the question. When a story is stale, that's about you. That's about the storyteller. When you focus more on the, and look, we've all had it happen, like myself included, guilty. But when a story gets stale, you've got to reinvent it, get coaching on it, find somebody to help you for you to get excited again. If you can't get excited about it, don't tell it, because it's about us helping the audience. So if you're bored telling the story, they're going to sense it. They're going to feel it, and that's not fair to them. When we put the audience in front of us, you know, our ego, and we want to look good and we want to impress them, well, that's the wrong attitude. That's the wrong intention. Ask yourself, I learned this question from a man named Willie Jolly, one of my mentors. He said, ask yourself, how would I give this presentation if I knew it was my last one ever? How would I give this presentation? Because guess what? There's going to be some people in your audience who will never, ever be there again. Even in your own club, they'll be a guest. This is your one time to help them. In my home studio, I have a little Post-it right next to my lens, so I see it every time. Present like it's your last time. Like it's your last time. When you have that intention, it won't be stale. But if you have a story that is stale, get coaching on it, number one, or just don't tell it. Tell the ones that you're harder in, but tell it for the audience. The night before the World Championship, Mark Brown saw my ego getting in my way, and he pulled me aside. He said, Darren, tomorrow morning, you have the privilege of 2,000 lives for 7 minutes. What will you do with that? When you come from that place, you can't bomb. You know, right now, that's where I'm at. I'm doing this best as I can. I got like 2 minutes, but I'm giving you by the best that I have. And my goal is that you want more from me because I know how much I can help people. I've seen it. You know, when I can spend an hour, I give people new ideas, new perspective. But when you can spend some time with a month with us in stage time, a year with us, Sarah is one of our members. She's been around for a while. Like I know the impact we can have because there's so much to learn. And I love Toastmasters. It's a great place to get started. It's a great place to get feedback. It's not designed to be world-class training. That's not what it is. That's not its intention. And it can't be everything. And I realize that's my little niche in the world, was helping good presenters become unforgettable. Salazar?
Now, Darren, I know you're going to have to go, but Chandra Dravani actually asked if she quotes from a book and gives credit to the author and uses that as the story. Is that okay?
Great question. My bigger question is why? Why are you telling that? Because if you quote the author, okay, so legally that's good. You're good. But I'm asking you to step back and ask why. Because people, You know, I love Toastmasters. I started out the same place everybody else did. But a lot of Toastmasters give speeches where there's 3 motivational quotes in it. Okay. I have a motivational quote book. Everybody in Toastmasters had a motivational quote book. Okay. And so don't just quote people for the sake of quoting people because it backs up your idea. Here's the only exception, because people said, well, you quoted Brian Tracy in your speech. Okay. This goes back to great storytelling. Here's how I was living my life. Then I heard the Brian Tracy quote. Then I lived my life differently. So going back to the person who asked the question, I would only tell that story if it had a profound impact and changed your perspective. That's when you can tell that story. But if you're just telling that story because it's a good story, I think personally, forgive me, I think there's so much better content inside you. Maybe you just haven't learned how to mine it yet. And I understand that. We all have to learn that. Salazar?
Darren, actually, since it's 7:01, I want to actually give everyone an opportunity to applaud you, thank you, and give you all the love that you gave to us and let you on your way. For District 101 people, we'll be back here Tuesday at 6 p.m. Come on back. Darren, thank you so very much.
Darren.
Thank you. Thank you. And
Great seeing you.
by the way, Henry and Sarah, hello. Henry and Sarah could probably take more of the questions and tell you exactly what I'd answer. If you guys don't have to go, I just have to go.
Okay.
So thank
All
you,
right.
Salazar. I put the link in the chat. Check out our podcast. Get the top 10 mistakes, and I'd love to have you join us in stage time. Click on that link, and that'll tell you a little bit more. All right, my fellow Toastmasters, stage
Bye.
time, stage time, stage time. Thank you, Salazar. Bye, Henry. Bye,
Thank
Sarah.
you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much, Darren. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you Tuesday with Satish Shenoy for our next session, Speak, Lead, and Serve. So if you haven't already registered for that, please do. And thank you all. There are no questions in the chat. So thanks again.